I'm going to be leading the Talkback today. I'm Jeremy Lentz, Executive Director of the festival, and I'd like to introduce our panelists. We're very privileged tonight to have the filmmaker, Brian Smith, who's a Texas native, New York City-based actor, best known for his role as Will Gorski in Wachowski's hit Netflix series Sense8, and he's been nominated for a Tony and Olivier Award for his work on stage in The Glass Menagerie, both on Broadway and in London's West End. And this film marks Brian's directorial debut, which we'll talk about in a bit. Jeremy Truong, I'm pronouncing it correctly, producer, also New York-based producer, co-founder of Rubber Tape. Jeremy's work centers around LGBTQ+ and POC filmmakers to tell authentic and unique stories. His first film, Cicada, was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award, and his producing credits also include the short films See You Soon, Dirty, which were featured on the Short of the Week, a named Vimeo staff pick. He also produced Grindr's first original series, Bridesman, which was nominated for an Emmy and Tribeca X Award. And we also have Wren Logan. Wren is a research volunteer who is currently working towards a doctorate at Rutgers Newark University. She's here today representing our film sponsor, the Teaneck Creek Conservancy, which is right here on the grounds of the Puffin Foundation. And I encourage patrons to learn about that, although it's dark, you can't see it now, but if you came early, you could see the grounds here that were restored from an actual dump to an incredible ecological nature conservancy here. And Wren will speak to the science elements of the documentary as it relates to climate change. Wren studies anthropogenic impacts on bird communities, and she works with the Teaneck Creek Conservancy during the summer, monitoring which birds use Teaneck Creek Park for nesting. So, my first question is for Brian, and I'll just preface this. What's so interesting for me, being a native New Yorker who grew up going out to Fire Island since high school, had shares out there, I thought it was really quite remarkable how you kind of captured so many different facets of the island, from the history to the communities to kind of the social structure of the island, and obviously the pandemics, right? HIV and AIDS, COVID, and now the climate crisis. For you, I guess, transitioning from an actor to a director, this is your directorial debut, how did the project come about? What was this like? What was the genesis? And how does one, kind of shift from being an actor to going behind the camera?
Well, I'm still kind of grasping onto my acting career. I'm actually going to be doing a play in the spring, so it's actually been kind of weird, kind of taking my directing hat off and getting back into like actor space. It is very interesting. This film actually came about because I was in Atlanta, Georgia, working on a mini series, and we were just getting blasted with COVID. I mean, like every week someone else would get it, and we'd have to shut down, and so we were just basically trapped in our apartments for like, it felt like months. It literally was months. We went like 5 months over schedule on this thing. So I was like trapped in my apartment and just like, this is ridiculous. Like, what the fuck am I doing? And got a call from Adam Klesch, who's one of the Pines Party producer guys, and he was like, hey, listen, I think I can get you access to film at the Pines Party. And started talking to him. I got, Jeremy involved, and Eric Schleicher, our DP, started to get interested, and from there it just became a little bit more broader in scope. It became less about like the party and more about like, the context of the community that the party was taking place in. So yeah, I just kind of snowballed from there, and people seemed really excited to work on something like this. I mean, especially if you're filming in paradise. I mean, it's sort of an easy sell.
It's so interesting. So, and the film was shot over, 2022, 23? So it was like coming out of the pandemic. period? Yeah, interesting. What do you feel, what do you want audiences to take away from this film?
I mean, I think the interesting thing about it is that I sort of have real control over that in a way. It's like already actually the film is quite different. I mean, we made this in 2022. This was before the election. This was like the summer of Roe v. Wade getting, tossed. It was also the summer of monkeypox. We were in a different kind of place back then. So already the film is like, there's some distance in time, and it's starting to feel a little bit more reflective in a weird way of like how we feel right now, which is like, a little bit embattled and a little bit less in control of our destiny. And that was sort of what was happening out there in the pines in that summer. So it actually just is feeling a little bit more. So to answer your question, it's that's going to be something that changes. I mean, who knows how people would feel about the film 4 years from now. It may feel a little more revolutionary, actually. It may feel a little more like, oh my God, like, is that what we lost?
Yeah, you capture this kind of unique moment in time, and there's so many facets to it in terms of where will the island go? Will it still be there, in 10, 20 years? Will the Pines Party still be a thing, or will it go away? I worked as a host director on the Fire Island Dance Festival for 6 years, and just bringing people out to that and the challenges each year that come along with that. Producing anything on that island is a massive challenge. Jeremy, this question is for you, and I think Brian touched on this. We're 2 days out of an election. You are a producer for largely marginalized groups, similar to what we do here at the Puffin Foundation and giving grant funding to artists who are marginalized. And your work probably just got a whole lot more important and perhaps maybe more harder in certain ways. So as a producer, I'll pose this question: where do we go from here?
Yeah, we were just talking about this in the car before. It's weird. Like, we filmed this, I think, maybe in a place where we didn't realize how much safety, really, and like comfortability we had when we made this. I think 2022 was, like, looking back at it, quite a stable time for us, like coming out of COVID, and watching it today after not having seen it for a little bit now. Just, I think, kind of to Skylar's point, one of the documentary subjects is that it's such a cyclical thing. Like, I think this concept and this idea of making work that feels important and making work that feels at least timely to the moment is never going to go out of style. It's never going to go out of not be important. I think something that was I think really important when we made this film was, I think, just sort of a learning experience about what it is you can take away from something that seemingly feels like could easily be, like a Fire Island movie that's like about partying, about drugs, and about sex. It's like we took something that I think has all those connotations, all those stereotypes, and we kind of boiled it down to what's important to Brian, what's important to me. I had never been in the island before we started making this movie. When Brian sort of brought it to me, it was like kind of an interesting thing for me as someone who visited it and researched and filmed and learned about it and experienced it all at the same time, and also as a person of color. It was a really different experience from Brian. And so I think, moving forward as filmmakers, like, something that I think is really beautiful about how we made this is that it was a combination of all of our experiences, and how having someone who's not an expert on Fire Island actually working on a Fire Island documentary brought such a unique perspective to it. So much so that, I leaned a lot on Brian as well, I think, to inform me and enrich experiences about why this community was so important to him. It's never made sense to me before, and so I think in general, like, filmmaking and telling stories in general has always been a way of communicating what matters to us, and I hope that people continue to use that to, like, tell stories about things they care about, because I think many people don't think they would care about a movie like this, and they watch it and it really does, like, strike them quite personally, and hopefully that continues to happen.
Yeah, I think your work as a producer just got a whole lot more important as well. Being able to uplift and tell stories about marginalized groups is going to be critical as we go into this next phase. Wren, I want to bring you into the conversation. With a background working in climate change and what you see as a PhD student, can you speak to kind of the shifts that you see happening in Fire Island with, the talk that it's a barrier island to Long Island, and there is a lot of talk that the island will effectively at some point just disappear by the ocean and it won't exist. And I know, once the summers end, the storms in the wintertime, the island, last winter got massively flooded, and there was talk they weren't going to be able to open up on time and all those kind of things. So, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think in America we're very lucky. We're the country that has the most barrier islands of any country in the world, and we have them all up and down our Atlantic coast, and they're actually really dynamic ecosystems. They're always moving northward, following what is known as the longshore current, which is this current that develops along the coast that's a result of both winds as well as natural tidal movements and stuff like that as well. And because of that, there are these really beautiful ecosystems, and they're largely, they're moving all the time, but historically they've not moved as fast as they're moving today. They have been both accelerated by climate change as well as through some of our anthropogenic impacts related to development on these islands. So we've been building a lot of houses and infrastructure on these islands that are islands that are not going to be in the same place forever. And so some of these homes that have been built a really long time ago are now facing the impacts of some of that. And even we're, as the movie was talking about, we're having to spend a lot of federal dollars to try to protect these communities that have been put on these islands that are naturally moving. But of course, as climate change, with sea level rise happening, as well as increased frequency of hurricanes and increased intensity of hurricanes, we're starting to see that erosion happen more quickly. And as sand dune habitats, which have historically had vegetation, which keep a lot of that sand sediment in place, have gotten destroyed through development, some of these natural barriers to that increasing movement northward have been dissipated. And so the movie is absolutely right where we, these communities are really at risk, and some of the solutions that we put in place to try to keep these communities here, such as putting seawalls in place and putting in huge berms of sand, while they help in the short term, in the long term, they can actually threaten the existence of the barrier island community itself. And so it's a really tricky problem with not a really one size fits all solution. There's definitely always going to be winners and losers in an ecological sense as we try to navigate what to do about these barrier island ecosystems.
So it's hard for you to say whether the island could be there, it could be not. Are there things apart from the kind of what they do with the dunes to help protect the island further?
Yeah, so of course planting some of the vegetation that's native in those areas. So what's really unique about vegetation in sand dune ecosystems is that they have really, really, really dense root systems, and more dense than root systems that you find in a lot of other habitats. So these root systems form essentially really deep, it almost looks like a carpet underneath all of the sand. And it keeps all of that sand in place so that tidal movements don't take it away, because the plants themselves have a vested interest in being able to continue their life on this barrier island. So they've developed over evolutionary time this mechanism to not have the sediment move so that their existence can continue. So I think through planting native vegetation, that's one way that we can try to slow down the movement again. Of course, we could also as a society decide that we want to reduce our use on petrochemicals, fossil fuels, and try to reduce our carbon emissions. But of course, that's a really hard thing to accomplish politically. But other than those steps that we can take that we've all heard about on the news to try to reduce climate change, and through trying to create some of these preserving strategies like planting more of this native vegetation, which of course takes a lot of time to grow. Most of what I think we're going to have to accomplish as a result of climate change is becoming more resilient to it. Like, these impacts are probably going to happen, and so like, we all just have to really get better at developing solutions to adapt to these changes that we're seeing. And we're not just seeing them on Fire Island, we're seeing them in coastal communities all around the world where the majority of our population lives. So and these are going to be the communities that are going to be the first to face the impacts of it, and we're already seeing it today. So I think it's mostly going to be about trying to stop climate change as best as we can, and trying to make changes ecologically that are tailored to the communities that we're looking at. This is my best guess.
So I have another question for Brian, and then I want to open it up to the audience for Q&A. Personal connection, to Fire Island. When was the first time you went out there, as somebody, and the film you touch upon, different people feel differently about the island. And, there's a criticism of the island that it's very much, there's that hierarchy where it's wealth related, it's, color related, marginalized communities, people of color don't feel accepted there. And I know the island has tried, which the film addresses, to make those movements. But what was your personal kind of experience with that the first time you went out?
Well, I think my experience there was definitely colored by my readings of Larry Kramer and books like The Dancer from the Dance. Fire Island already sort of existed in my mind, and even geographically, I felt just from those books and from those writers, this Edmund White too. I mean, it felt so it had been described so beautifully to me. So I had this very bizarre experience of being in this place that was sort of frozen in time in the 1970s. So yeah, it was interesting though too, because I came at a time it was the summer, I think, that Sense8 had come out, and I remember going to tea with some friends, and I guess I don't know, it was just weird, there were some people there that had recognized me from the show that had never happened before, and it was really hot. I got really nervous and almost had a panic attack. Actually, I had to leave tea and go home and just chill by myself. So my experiences in the Pines have always been very not the party side. It's always just been, it's a place I went to just sit by a pool and go to the beach and sort of get the fuck away from the city and breathe some good healthy air. Yeah, so that was kind of my first time being there, right? But of course, talking to the homeowners and people that have been out there for a long time, it is really interesting to read about the way that place has sort of evolved over the years. And I would say now, I mean, when we filmed the documentary, they were definitely at a crossroads. It felt like the place was gonna either go a little bit more towards the past or more towards this sort of more colorful, more gender accepting and open-minded, less looking for the dude with the perfect body and the mustache, and it definitely has. If you go out there now, the place feels even more different than it did when we filmed it. It's really taking on the color and the diversity of this younger group of queer people.
Did it feel like a gay paradise to you the first time you went out?
Oh yeah. I mean,
no place like it, right? No
Yeah.
place like it. It's interesting because I remember the first time I went out, I was in high school, and I went out with a best friend of mine who happened to be a lesbian, and we had, we just heard about it, right? And we show up, we took the first ferry out, we get to the Ice Palace, which is on the Cherry Grove side, and we're there first thing on a Sunday morning. Nobody is around, and we're at the desk, ringing the bell to the desk. I mean, it could have been a movie, and after 10 minutes, somebody gets up in a stupor and is oh, this must be your first time here. Clearly, you've never been on the island, you can't show up at this time. And they were well, this is what you can do. You can go, the beach is there, the meat rack's in the middle, the Pine's there, and you'll just figure it out. And that was the experience. So
that's the best way to do it, though.
very much a special place. So I want to take some questions from the audience. Questions, comments? Yes?
Wren, the vegetation you're talking about planting, the dunes and the grass and stuff there, they sound like they're really hard to plant and have them take hold if they have this incredibly extensive, dense root structure, that might be, not really effective, but it's window dressing more or less.
Yeah, so one of the really most prominent dune grasses that we have in the United States is sea oats, and of course it takes a long time for that root structure to form, and so definitely it is something that would not, it would take a lot of time to be able to take hold, and it would also need the right conditions as well. So a lot of the reason that sand dune habitats are kind of going away as more and more of these barrier islands get developed is that they're very sensitive to disturbance, and so as more people walk through the dunes, it can very easily trample and kill those grasses, and so that's in a number. I'm not quite sure about Fire Island specifically in this situation, but there are a lot of barrier islands that have a lot of rules about being able to walk on the dunes and stuff like that, and it's mostly to protect those very sensitive grass habitats. So definitely it's a solution that I think if it were allowed to persist, I don't know that it would necessarily be window dressing, but it would take a lot of effort to bring those ecosystems back, and at the same time, if we're accelerating climate change, it's further going to put those ecosystems at risk.
Yes.
I just wonder, because I know there are a lot of different communities on Fire Island besides the Pines, and I wonder, is there tension between communities? Do you ever experience interlopers that are not well intended?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, it was one of the pities of making this is that there was also sort of the other half of Fire Island, which is Cherry Grove, right? And in a lot of ways, you can't have Fire Island, the Pines without Cherry Grove. In a weird way, the Pines kind of grew out of Cherry Grove, which is if I could have made a 4-hour film, there's so much more stuff we could have gotten into. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really hear about a lot of. It seems like there's more the more sort of straight party communities, I think, and they just kind of maybe don't tend to come to the Pines, and if they do, it's girls on a a bachelorette party or something like that, and and then of course all the guys are there just rolling their eyes and what are you doing here? But it's all in good fun. You know what I mean? There's always a sense of each of those communities does have their own sort of identity, but there's a sort of there's a grace I think they all give each other, which is sort of charming to see,
Any other questions, comments? I have one more, and then we'll wrap it up. Random question. The soundtrack in this film was really interesting, the choice of music. Particularly, there's a Yiddish song in here that you chose, Tumbala. And, I just know coming from my background, spending summers in the Catskills with Eastern European grandma, I knew that song. And I was was there any particular reason as to why you put it in there, or just kind of wanting to fit that image of something that was Barry Sisters, something kind of kitsch?
I mean, I wish the answer was a little more complicated, and but there was to me when I listened to it, I had no idea that it was a well-known Yiddish song. It just came to me through my going through a music hole on Spotify, I believe, and I just love the sound of this. I had no idea what they were singing, but something about the it sounded like, I don't know, I felt like I was in the Goofy Riviera or something like that.
Maybe the Borscht Belt Riviera.
Yeah.
Could have heard it.
Yeah, so it was more the sound and the tone of it than the sort of backstory of the song. Which is why we picked all the songs in it. It was they sort of seem to like match the poetry of the moment, or to fight against it. Like I don't know. The soundtrack was very dear to us. We had a lot of fun putting that together.
Well, with that, we're going to wrap up. I'd like to thank our panelists, Jeremy, for the work that you do, for helping to bring this film to light. I hope that we see it out there. I know it's doing the rounds on the festival circuit, both nationally and internationally. And if you just want to maybe mention where people can go if they want to follow the film, or see the kind of trajectory of it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we're still doing festivals. We're probably still doing festivals through like early next year, and then hopefully it'll end up somewhere after that. But the title of the film is our Instagram page, so you guys can check it out there. But hopefully it will be available at home to you guys soon, because I think we had always made it with the intention of it being like a at-home watch, like with the girls, and it's structured that way.
Yeah, we always like kind of thought too, this would be a fun movie just like to have on your TV, like like during like a dinner party or like cocktails or something like that, right? It's not like a narrative story, like, oh shit, what just happened? I missed it. It's like, well, you could kind of pop in at any moment and enjoy it. And that was sort of like, yeah, it was. That would be the greatest compliment for us, actually, is like, it makes such great background in our cocktail party.
And what's next for you, Brian, as far as directing, acting?
Well, I'm doing a play at Signature Theater next year with Sam Hunter's new play with Brendan Fraser. We're going to be playing brothers, so it's come see it. It's like one of the most incredible things I have ever read in my life, and I cannot believe they're letting me do it. So that's going to be in, I think we start previews in February.
So Signature Theater, and the name of the show?
Grangeville.
Grangeville. I've seen stuff already popping up being advertised. And Wren, PhD student, Teaneck Creek Conservancy. What's next?
Yeah. I just started my second year as a PhD student at Rutgers, New York, and I'm working on my PhD project is going to be based on the community ecology of migratory birds that utilize urban green spaces as stopover sites, with the goal of trying to help inform research on developing green spaces that are more migratory bird friendly. And so I'll be continuing to do that. We have a bird banding station at Rutgers, New York that just finished our fall season, so I'll be doing that next spring when we start the spring migration season. And of course, I'll be helping with the bird banding project at Teaneck Creek Conservancy next summer. So we run a MAPS station, or a monitoring avian productivity and survivorship station, which is like a large science project that's basically trying to understand how breeding birds are doing during the summer, and so I'm really excited to help out with that. And if you're interested in learning more about that or getting to be involved with that, please talk to me or Kathleen, who's in the back, and we can help you on getting connected.
Great, and I'd just like to thank Kathleen Farley, who serves as the executive director of the Teaneck Creek Conservancy right here. The work that they have done in this community is tremendous to provide us with green spaces, and the park just reopened after how many years, Kathleen?
2 years.
2 years of being closed for all that ecological renovation.
Yes, we had a 20-acre wetland creation and habitat restoration project. So the interior of the park is now freshwater wetlands.
So I'd encourage people to come back in the daytime. You may have been here as the sun was setting and see all the sculpture garden out here, but the grounds are pretty remarkable and great for bird watching and just kind of hiking and meditation and stuff.